On March 25, 1938, a man named Ettore Majorana, a physicist whom Enrico Fermi, the architect of the nuclear age, ranked alongside Isaac Newton and Galileo Galilei, stepped onto a post steamer in Naples bound for Palermo. He was 31 years old. He carried with him a significant sum of money, his passport, and a mind that appeared to have perceived a fundamental, terrifying truth about the structure of reality that his peers would not grasp for decades. Majorana did not arrive in Palermo as a passenger seeking rest, he arrived as a ghost in transition. He checked into the Grand Hotel de Palms, sent 2 cryptic letters that contradicted one another within hours, and then, according to the official record, vanished into the salt spray of the Tyrrhenian Sea. However, the forensic reality of the case suggests something far more disturbing than a simple suicide or a standard disappearance. There was no body. There was no suicide note that lacked a subsequent retraction. There was only a void where one of the greatest intellects in human history had been standing. To understand why Majorana disappeared, one must understand that he was not just a scientist, he was a man who had solved the riddle of the Majorana fermion, a particle that is its own antiparticle, and in doing so, he may have realized that the world was not ready for what his mathematics could unlock. The anomaly begins not with his disappearance, but with his silence. Years before he stepped onto that boat, Majorana had already begun to retreat from the scientific community. He was a man who would scribble world-changing equations on cigarette packs and then throw them away in the trash, refusing to publish findings that would later win other men Nobel Prizes. When James Chadwick discovered the neutron in 1932, Majorana reportedly laughed, stating that he had calculated its existence years prior but didn't think it was worth mentioning. This was a mind operating on a frequency that bypassed ego, focused entirely on the cold, structural logic of the universe. By 1938, that logic had led him to a dark conclusion. His disappearance was not a panicked flight, it was a calculated withdrawal. On the evening of his departure, he wrote to Antonio Corelli, the director of the Naples Physics Institute, stating that he had made a decision that was now inevitable, apologizing for the inconvenience his sudden disappearance would cause. But hours later, he sent a telegram from Palermo telling Corelli to ignore the previous letter, stating that he was returning to Naples the next day. He even wrote to his family, asking them not to wear black for more than 3 days. These were the actions of a man creating a deliberate fog, a statistical interference pattern intended to mask his true trajectory. The investigation launched by the Italian state was unprecedented. Benito Mussolini himself took a personal interest in the case, fueled by the realization that Majorana possessed knowledge vital to the burgeoning race for atomic energy. The police scoured the coastlines, the monasteries, and the shipping manifests. They found nothing. No witness could definitively place him on the return ferry from Palermo to Naples, despite a ticket being used in his name. This is the first logical pivot, the man who used the ticket may not have been Majorana. Forensics of the era were limited, but the behavioral profile was clear. Majorana was a master of patterns. If he wanted to vanish, he would not simply jump overboard, he would ensure that the probability of his discovery was reduced to 0. He understood that in quantum mechanics, a particle's position is a matter of probability until it is observed. In March 1938, Ettore Majorana ceased to be an observed object. The vacuum left by his absence began to fill with a specific type of dread. His colleagues, including Fermi, began to speculate that Majorana had seen the blueprint for the atomic bomb long before the Manhattan Project was even a concept. He had looked into the heart of the atom and seen not just energy, but an existential threat that the political climate of the late 1930s would inevitably weaponize. The cold truth suggests that Majorana did not leave because of a breakdown, but because of a breakthrough. He was the only one among his peers who possessed the moral foresight to realize that the only way to win the coming war of annihilation was to refuse to play. This leads us to the second logical pivot, occurring decades later in a location thousands of miles from the Italian coast. In the mid-1950s, a man in Venezuela known only as Mr. Binny became the subject of intense local rumors. He was a man of immense intelligence who refused to have his photograph taken and possessed a deep, inexplicable knowledge of advanced physics. When a witness finally managed to snap a photograph of this man in 1955, the image revealed a face that, when subjected to modern digital aging analysis and skeletal mapping, showed a startling number of points of congruency with Ettore Majorana. The shape of the jaw, the specific alignment of the orbital sockets, and the hairline were nearly identical, adjusted for 20 years of aging. More importantly, the witness claimed that Binny drove a Studebaker, a car that required a level of financial stability inconsistent with a simple wanderer, yet the man lived with a strange, ascetic simplicity. If Binny was Majorana, it meant the physicist had successfully navigated the chaos of World War II, bypassed the global intelligence network searching for wonder weapons, and established a life of total anonymity in the southern hemisphere. But why? Why would a man capable of ruling the scientific world choose to live as a shadow in Caracas? The answer may lie in the notebooks he left behind in Italy, the Quaderni. These documents, filled with dense, elegant handwriting, contain calculations that even today challenge the boundaries of theoretical physics. Majorana was exploring a third way, a method of understanding matter and energy that bypassed the destructive path of nuclear fission. He was looking for a way to manipulate reality itself without the radioactive fallout. If he had succeeded, or even come close, he would have become the most valuable and dangerous human being on the planet. To the Americans, the Soviets, or the fascists, he was a walking shortcut to ultimate power. In this context, his disappearance shifts from a mystery of psychology to a mystery of survival. The letters he wrote in 1938 weren't suicide notes, they were a no trespassing sign posted on the border of his life. He was dead to the world so that his knowledge could remain buried. Yet, the forensic trail does not end with a blurry photo in Venezuela. There is the matter of the Jesuit monastery in Naples. Shortly before his disappearance, witnesses reported seeing a man matching Majorana's description seeking entry into the religious life, not for spiritual salvation, but for sanctuary. The Church has remained notoriously silent on this matter for nearly a century. If Majorana sought refuge behind the walls of a cloister, he was utilizing the one institution that could rival the state in its ability to hide a man. This introduces a new layer of complexity. Did he choose the physical isolation of South America, or the spiritual isolation of the cell? Or, as some evidence suggests, did he move between both? The Italian Carabinieri reopened the case in 2011, focusing on the Venezuelan lead. Their conclusion, released in 2015, was both definitive and haunting. They stated that they had found sufficient evidence to believe Majorana was alive in the period between 1955 and 1959, living in the city of Valencia, Venezuela. They officially closed the case, not because they found him, but because they confirmed he had successfully escaped. But escaped is a relative term. A man of Majorana's intellect does not simply stop thinking. If he was alive in the 1950s, he was watching from the periphery as the world entered the era of mutual assured destruction, the very nightmare he had arguably foreseen in 1938. The tragedy of the genius who vanished is not that he was lost, but that he was right. He predicted the neutron, he predicted the neutrino's mass, and he predicted that humanity would use his discoveries to build a gallows for itself. The analytical question we must ask is, what was the final discovery that convinced him he could no longer exist in society? What was the equation that made the world look like a prison? The search for Ettore Majorana is not merely a search for a missing person, it is a search for a missing future. In 2015, the Rome prosecutor's office officially closed the investigation into his disappearance, declaring that between 1955 and 1959, Ettore Majorana was undeniably living in Valencia, Venezuela. This was not a theory, it was a forensic conclusion based on a photograph taken in 1955. In that image, a man identified as Mr. Binny stands beside a man named Francesco Fazzani. When the Italian authorities applied modern facial recognition algorithms and skeletal matching to this photograph, the results were chilling. The distance between the pupils, the specific curvature of the nasal bone, and the unique attachment of the earlobes were a 1:1 match with the young physicist from 1938. But this answer only opens a deeper, more unsettling information gap. How does a man recognized as one of the most brilliant minds in the history of nuclear physics simply walk away from a world at war and live out his days in a South American garage? The logical pivot here involves the Binney photograph and a specific piece of physical evidence within it, a 100 lire coin. Forensic analysts noted a small, metallic glint in the pocket area of Fasani's shirt in the original print. Under high-resolution scanning, it was identified as an Italian coin from a specific minting series. This suggests a continued, albeit covert, connection to his homeland. But why the silence? To understand the silence, we must examine the specific nature of Majorana's work in the months leading up to his disappearance. He was obsessively studying the concept of phase transitions in both matter and social structures. He had begun to treat human history as a statistical system, much like the particles he calculated. He believed that certain individuals acted as singularities, points where the predictable flow of history could be diverted by a single action or a single piece of knowledge. Majorana likely realized that his presence in the 20th century was a singularity that would lead to a catastrophic outcome. By 1938, the scientific world was racing toward the critical mass required for an atomic chain reaction. Majorana's notebooks from this period contain hints of a different path, a way to harness the energy of the vacuum itself, or perhaps a way to neutralize the very forces the Manhattan Project sought to unleash. If he had stayed, he would have been forced to choose a side. In a world of fascism, Nazism, and Stalinism, a mind like Majorana's was not a person, it was a weapon of mass destruction. His disappearance was a strategic withdrawal of that weapon. He chose to delete himself from the equation to prevent the result. However, the mystery does not end in a Venezuelan suburb. There is a second, darker thread that surfaced in the late 1970s, centered around a man named Rolando Polizza. Polizza claimed to have been a student of a great master whom he met in a monastery in the 1950s. He produced a series of letters and technical blueprints that he claimed were provided by Majorana. These documents described a technology that sounds like science fiction, a device capable of annihilating matter or transforming it into different elements without the need for a nuclear reactor. Polizza even provided footage of what he called the machine, a device that appeared to make blocks of foam or metal vanish into thin air, leaving only a faint thermal signature. While many dismissed Polizza as a charlatan, the cold truth remains that the mathematics within those letters were analyzed by modern physicists and found to be consistent with Majorana's unique, Dirac-style notation, a style so specific and complex that very few people on Earth could have forged it. This suggests that Majorana did not stop his research, he simply moved it into the shadows, operating outside the oversight of any government or corporation. This leads us to a third logical pivot, the role of the Vatican. Records indicate that in the days following his 1938 disappearance, Majorana's mother received a visit from a high-ranking cleric who offered her spiritual comfort but also asked specific questions about her son's papers. Throughout the 1940s and 50s, sightings of a man matching Majorana's description were reported at the San Pasquale Monastery in Naples and the Certosa di Serra San Bruno in Calabria. The monks at these locations are bound by a vow of silence that even the Italian police could not break. If Majorana was using the church as a logistical network, it explains how he could move from Italy to South America without a paper trail. The church has a long history of sheltering individuals who possess knowledge that could destabilize the social order. In this context, Majorana was not a refugee, he was a secret. The analytical reality of the case must reconcile these two paths, the quiet life of Mr. Binney in Venezuela and the radical, hidden science of the master in the monastery. It is possible that they are the same path. Majorana, a man who viewed reality through the lens of quantum superposition, may have lived a life that was itself a superposition. To the public and his family, he was a tragedy, a young genius who committed suicide. To the scientific elite, he was a mystery. And to the few who sheltered him, he was a man continuing a work that was too dangerous for the sunlit world. The 2011 Carabinieri investigation confirmed that Fasani, the man in the 1955 photo, was an Italian immigrant with ties to the same circles Majorana moved in. Fasani died taking the secret of Binney to his grave, but he left behind a statement that the man in the photo was a person of immense importance who had chosen to be nobody. As we approach the final reveal, we must consider the Majorana fermion once more. In physics, a Majorana particle is its own reflection. It is both matter and antimatter. It exists in a state of perfect balance. Majorana's life followed this exact blueprint. He reflected the world back at itself, showing it the horror of what it was building, and then he neutralized himself. He became his own antiparticle. The forensic trail suggests he lived until at least the late 1950s, but rumors persist of a very old man living in the Venezuelan hinterlands as late as the 1990s. If he survived that long, he lived to see the Cold War, the landing on the moon, and the birth of the digital age, all of which were built on the foundations he helped lay. The ultimate synthesis of the mystery is not that Majorana was kidnapped, or that he died in the sea, or that he became a monk. The evidence points toward a much more profound conclusion. Ettore Majorana staged the first recorded instance of social quantum tunneling. He calculated that his physical presence in Europe was a catalyst for a global catastrophe. Using his knowledge of systems, he created a set of conflicting signals, the letters, the sightings, the fake suicide, that created enough noise to mask his actual movement. He then exited the observed world and entered the unobserved world. He realized that the only way to remain a scientist without being an accomplice to murder was to disappear. The reveal of his ultimate fate is found in his last known writing, a fragment found in a notebook long after his disappearance. In it, he wrote that nature has a way of protecting its secrets from those who would use them for anything other than understanding. Majorana believed that certain truths about the universe were self-protecting. If a human mind became too dangerous, the universe would, in a sense, eject it. He didn't just run away, he aligned himself with that universal protection. He chose to become a secret of nature. To this day, the machine described in the Pulitzer letters has never been replicated. The Majorana fermion was only officially observed in a laboratory in 2012, nearly 75 years after he predicted it. The man was not just ahead of his time, he was operating in a different dimension of logic. Ettore Majorana did not die in 1938. He simply stopped being an object of our observation, proving his own theories by becoming the only particle in human history to successfully exist and not exist at the very same time.